Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Providend's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, Associate Advisor at Providend. Joining with me today is Loh Yong Cheng, who is our Advisory Team Lead. Hi Yong Cheng.
Hi Isaac.
Yeah, glad to have you here today. So before we begin, could you share a little about yourself and your wealth management journey?
Sure. Thanks Isaac for the question. I'm a father of two young children. As Isaac introduced, I'm the team lead at advisory team. I joined Providend in 2017. Prior to joining Providend, I graduated with an accounting degree. So naturally, I went into being an auditor. And then after 2 years, I realized that that's not something that I really enjoy doing. So I moved out and joined NTUC as Industrial Relations Officer. So I think the joke about the job is that my mom actually thought that I worked for the NTUC supermarket. But actually I had to explain to her that I was representing blue-collar workers on the union side to negotiate and to represent them on the grievance level. So that was me for a good 5 years. Very good learning journey, meaningful. Taught me to see the world in a different perspective. And also because my father is a union member, he benefited from that. So then after that, I came across having to plan for my own finance. So Providend came in the picture, and then I wanted to do something that aligns with my values. And I wrote in and say, Providend, could you take me in, somebody who is without experience, to become a client advisor? I have all these cert. I passed my CFP Module 1, I did all the insurance paper. Would you want to take me in? So 5 years, or I think 6 years, here I am doing, I think, very meaningful work for our clients.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Yong Cheng. I mean, you have been in Providend, I think, since 2017, so that's 6 years now. And of course, holding the team lead position comes with a lot of responsibilities. So how do you find it so far? How do you find your Providend journey so far?
It's not easy. It's not easy. Why? Because at Providend, we don't just talk about the dollar and cents, just crunching numbers. We go into very deep value-based conversation with our clients, exchanging emotions. Not that we cry in a meeting, but then the questions that we have to ask clients is, along the way, to guide them in making life decisions before making financial decisions. So going into the life decision, the life goals aspect of things, trying to understand, trying to find good questions to ask them to go deeper into understanding the emotional aspects of how the life decision comes about. Those are things that we constantly trying to improve, so that we give clients, in another way, when we craft out the wealth plan for them, it reflects their goals, aspirations, their concerns, and their needs, and then the wealth plan is there to enable that to happen for them. So our job, I would say, along the way, clients do mention that we did create positive impact for them, help them to think money in a different way, help them to overcome some of the blind spots that they maybe on a personal level, when they plan for themselves, they may not have realized. So I personally feel that it is meaningful work to do.
Providing them with clarity and peace of mind.
Okay,
thank you for sharing, Yong Cheng. So today's topic is planning for the sandwich generation. So it's a profile that we come across from time to time here at Providend, and it poses unique challenges when it comes to wealth planning. So let's start with the definition. How do we define sandwich generation?
So sandwich generation, people who are a part of the sandwich generation are generally made up of middle-aged adults between 40 to 60. I think the unique part of their challenge is that they have to take care of two generations of people. So they have their children who are growing up, and then aged parents at the same time. So this is, and then for the children, of course, taking care of the children, they have their own sets of challenges. At the same time, most of them are also holding job, right? They might have their own career aspirations. All this creates, all these challenges, or caring for other different people poses a good big challenge for them.
So with low fertility rates and longer life expectancies in Singapore, our population is really aging quite rapidly. So according to an annual report by the National Population and Talent Division, 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be aged 65 and above by 2030. The proportion of the citizen population aged 65 and above is rising, and at a faster pace as compared to the last decade. So for those taking care of elderly people like yourself and young children, the sandwich generation, doing so can put a strain on finances. So what are some unique concerns faced by the sandwich generation?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, they are in between the two generations. So I mean, I would say that the first challenge will be time for them, because while they are most likely going to hold a full-time job, 8 hours taken away. When in the morning they will still have to take care of the children before sending them to school. After that, at the same time, potentially their parents will need them for various reasons, medical, or if not, they feel the need to wanting to spend time with their parents. Yeah. So from a time and space point of view, actually is quite challenging for people who are in the sandwich generation. Yeah. Not to say that they also face financial burdens, right? Because their parents may be dependent on them for their day-to-day living, right? In Asia or in Singapore context, we grow up knowing that we need to give allowance to our parents. That might potentially create a financial strain to people who are sandwich generations. At the same time, as their children are growing up, expenses might also go up, right? So, if it will also create a strain on their finances as well. Yeah, and at the same time, I think as an individual, they will have their own aspirations, their own hobbies, places that they want to go. Right? All this costs money, right? Yeah, so I think for them is to try to strike a balance between spending on themselves, all their loved ones, the children, and their aged parents.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing, Yong Cheng. So essentially, the sandwich generation have to be paying for their parents, and they have to pay for their children, of course. But they also have to fund their life goals, towards their life goals, all that. So that really, essentially, that's the main issue when it comes to challenges faced by the sandwich generation. So let's compare it with, let's say, safety briefings on a flight. So on a flight, they always say that before attending to your ward or your dependent, when oxygen masks are deployed, you have to put it on yourself first before helping your child. So is this approach similar to how we approach planning for the sandwich generation? That means like we focus on, we ask them to focus on securing themselves first.
Yeah. Thanks, Isaac, for the question. I think when it comes to planning for finances, it's really trying to strike a balance. I would say a balance that is constantly moving for not just somebody who's in the sandwich generation. It can be for somebody who is an accumulator or for retirees, right? Yeah. So when it comes to planning for finances, it is, like I said, most of us sometimes when on the immediate term look at a sandwich generation person who is in sandwich generation, their immediate thoughts will be to care for their loved ones, right? So as a parent of 2 young children myself, I can sense the temptation to give the best for my children, right? Perhaps give them the best form of education, buy them the best maybe tools to help them to succeed, or maybe spend a lot of time to maybe want to get them to the right school, right? Those are immediate needs that as parents, it's very hard to take them away, right? But at the same time, I also know that I need to spend time with my parents who are getting older. It might be just on a day-to-day basis. At the same time, they might also say, Yong Cheng, let's go for a trip, spend time together as a family. Those will require prep time. Those will require those will require money, right, to do so, right? Yeah. So those are immediate needs that, as somebody who's who's part of the sandwich generation, will face coming to them, right? Then, I think at the same time, this person got to take a step back and say, I also need to take care of myself, because what if I don't take care of myself? My children will become the next sandwich generation, because if I don't take care of my own finances well, I don't get myself adequately covered, I have not saved enough for retirement, then 20 years, 30 years down later, actually my children become the one having to care for me. And at the same time, they will potentially be married and then have children as well. Yeah, so I think it's about striking the right balance.
Yeah, breaking the vicious cycle.
It potentially has to break, or at least relieve them of the potential pressure that we, maybe at this generation, will face.
Right, so as you mentioned, supporting both parents and children's lifestyle can be very financially straining. So in terms of government support, government schemes, what are some of these schemes that can assist with this?
Yeah, there are good schemes that are out there. For example, as a parent, when there are baby bonus schemes, money that is being channeled by the government, supported by the government into our children's child development accounts, those could potentially help to offset school fees, enrichment class that the school provides. Those are quite substantial sum of money. Then for parents, there are possible financial assistance schemes. For example, if our parents are in the Merdeka generation or potentially in the pioneer generations, they do get quite good government assistance in terms of the medical side of things. And then if our parents has a fully paid house, if they're age 65 and above, and they could potentially be exploring schemes like lease buyback scheme, whereby they can potentially sell some of their HDB lease back to the government, and the government will then channel some of this money into their CPF to help them supplement their CPF life payout. Or potentially they could also be receiving some cash layout to help offset some of the living expenses.
Right, so by the HB buyback scheme basically is they can sell off the remaining lease up to their age 95, am I correct? Yeah, and then using that sum of money they can top up to their retirement account, and potentially for their CPF life, they are able to get at least an income that can support their basic lifestyle.
Yeah. So the HDB lease buyback scheme, it may not be a very easy conversation to have with our parents, because after all, those are hard-earned money that they have poured into savings and then paying the mortgage. Yeah. So for it could conceptually, it's also quite difficult for them to perhaps understand, why do I want to sell part of the house, so-called the house, to the government, right? If on a day-to-day basis, I am already okay with my lifestyle. My children are, seems to me like very comfortable supporting me. Yeah. So perhaps as somebody like myself who is preparing my parents on this scheme, you might not be able to convince them on the first cut to say, go for it, right? Yeah. So over time, maybe bring in this topic to get them on board with the idea first, conceptually, and then eventually they might see that maybe perhaps even maybe the children might not need the house. You don't need to leave behind the house for them. Selling some parts of the house on from a basis of the lease to the government actually could potentially uplift their retirement lifestyle.
Yeah, that's a great point that you mentioned, that bringing up this conversation can be quite tough. But also another interesting point that you brought up is that sometimes the parents themselves don't even know that receiving their allowance from their children is actually very straining to their children. So
I'd just like to add that I think most children will be happy to give allowance to their parents. After all, it is the way of life. Mostly, if we grow up in Singapore, this sort of the way of life in Singapore. Yeah. So I think the parents, or rather the children, usually don't mind. Yeah, I think that sometimes the children are just perhaps concerned that maybe my parents can live a better life, right? They don't have to worry about the next trip, the next place that they want to see before they may not be at the health state that they can climb the next Huangshan or maybe climb the next flight of stairs, right? Yeah. So I would say that it is financially, I think most people could work around it to provide to their parents. They just want to see whether their parents can live a more optimal lifestyle.
So another way that some people unlock additional cash, I mean, if they are the elderly, is to right size their property. So what that means is, for example, if you bought a home, actually it's for your family, but now that you're, like, let's say a 4-room HDB, for example, and now that your kids have grown up, they're independent, they have moved out, by right sizing the property down to a smaller size, you can actually unlock quite a bit of cash. Of course, you can use it to fund your retirement or fund your lifestyle, to go traveling, etc. So what do you think about this?
It's an interesting idea. While it makes sense financially, right? Right sizing the house could pour out certain equities from the house to help to supplement the parents' retirement lifestyle. I would imagine also that there are also life considerations around it, right? Because if, like my in-laws, right, they enjoy the big house while there's just two of them staying in there, but they enjoy the house size because over the weekends when the grandchildren come to the place, they have space to run around, right? They have place that they can pour the toys on the floor and they just play, right? Yeah. So sometimes while it makes sense financially to try to right size the house, there's also other life considerations to work around it, lah. Yeah. But that being said, if the financial constraint is such a big burden for the retiring couple or the parents, it makes sense to try to do so, because number one, it helps. It relieves them of having to hire a helper to clean the house, right? That reduces expenses on a day-to-day basis. Potentially, it also pour out certain equities to uplift retirement lifestyle. Yeah, I think these two make financial sense. But for parents, sometimes they do look at it from a lifestyle perspective and say, maybe it's not the time yet. Maybe not the time. I don't have to do it immediately. Maybe when my grandchildren are a bit older, they don't need the space. Maybe they come less frequently. Then I can do that in the future.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point, because like if financially or sometimes when you work out financial decisions on a spreadsheet, it might make sense, but when you think about it on a more emotional or relationship level, then you can come up with a different answer from that. Another main consideration for the sandwich generation is that unexpected circumstances may occur. For example, such as a child or a parent falling seriously ill. So what do we recommend to clients to mitigate this risk?
Good question there, Isaac. When we plan for our clients, most of the time we don't just plan for them. We also want to make sure that the loved ones are taken care of, right? So when we look at the children's risk management point of view, is that we want to make sure that the children are adequately covered from a medical standpoint. For example, they should be getting adequate medical insurance to take care of unforeseen hospitalization expenses. So in Singapore context, integrated shield plan with riders, those are essential for the children. Right? The same goes for looking after the aged parents. So making sure that they have adequate medical insurance, adequate cover will be something that we will look at for our clients, right? However, I think the biggest risk factor actually will be the parents themselves, right? The person who is the sandwich generation. Because imagine if something happens to them, if they fall seriously ill, unable to work, or if unforeseen demise happens to them, there are two generations depending on them, right? Yep. For their, not just their income, but also for from the time and assets standpoint. Yeah. So we will also encourage our clients who falls into this category to make sure that they are adequately covered from an insurance standpoint. Not just from hospitalization expenses, right? Those are important. If they fall seriously ill, they have adequate medical coverage to offset potential hospital bills. But we will also want to make sure that they are adequately covered from the life protection standpoint and also the critical illness standpoint. For example, if we want to make sure that if something happens to them, unforeseen demise happens to them, the assets pour out or the asset pour out would be sufficient enough to first maybe offset all the possible liabilities that they have, provide enough assets to replace the income that they will have otherwise generate to take care of their family until perhaps the children become adult. Sometimes some clients do request and say that what if, because my wife potentially may not be working at this juncture, could I insure myself enough so that I have extra assets, estate assets coming out to take care of my spouse's retirement? Yeah. So this is the angle that we will cover from the life protection standpoint. Right. Then we also want to make sure that in the event that the clients are seriously ill, whereby they are not able to work because of maybe they had suffered cancer, stroke, heart attack, those are serious conditions, then we will also need to provide enough from an income replacement standpoint to allow them to stop work and rest. Yeah. So then from a calculation standpoint, we will say, would you want to provide between a range of 3 to 5 years of your income to potentially offset this event if it happens to them? Yeah, so I would say that for the biggest risk will be biggest risk management will be on the person who is sandwich generation themselves to make sure that hospitalization is covered. They have sufficient insurance to cover for life protection and critical illness event.
Right. So off the top of my head, I was just thinking when you were sharing, what about those parents that are uninsurable? For example, let's say we have some listeners here. I think before the internet age, their parents' time, insurance maybe is something that, in terms of education, they're like thinking, this might not be necessary. But now, if let's say they want to get themselves covered, but they already have certain pre-existing condition. So how do we plan for those kind of situation?
Yeah. So there are a few ways we can plan for this situation. One is through the use of MediSave, right? So it's either that we boost our own MediSave, and because our MediSave can be used to offset our parents' medical bill. I imagine that would be a good tool to use because MediSave give pretty good interest rate, right? Yeah. We could also potentially top up their MediSave to help to offset potential medical bills like this, right? Alternatively is that we could potentially set aside what we call medical sinking fund, so money that on top of their own emergency funds that we can put aside this sum of money to take care of rainy days like this for our parents should they need any money paying for medical bills. In addition to what I mentioned previously about boosting our own MediSave or setting aside medical sinking fund, I think the fortunate thing in Singapore is that all Singaporeans or PR are covered by our national healthcare scheme called MediShield Life. That will largely mitigate a lot of medical costs should our parents who are in, like what as I mentioned, uninsurable, have to face medical crisis.
Right. Thanks for sharing, Yong Cheng. But I'm just thinking that despite all this planning and all these buffers, so sometimes unforeseen situations may occur. That maybe not only just wipe out all these buffers that people like the sandwich generation have planned for their children, for their parents, for example. So they may have to tap into their future resources in that case. So in your regular meetings with clients, let's say this situation happens, how do the discussions typically go, and what are some considerations or actions to be taken?
Yeah. So thanks, Isaac. This are very difficult situation because even as we had planned for the worst for the clients, this sounds like worse than worse, right?
Yeah.
Which means that even we had planned enough to make sure that the parents' savings are not wiped out, and then eventually you have to tap into your own resources. This can be very challenging for the person who is in a sandwich generation. I mean, because we also have to recognize that on a day-to-day basis, they have to take care of their children as well, right? Yeah. At Providend, we always say that our wealth plans are dynamic, which means that we will have to adjust our wealth plan according to our life circumstances, right? Our life circumstances at times could be positive, right? But in this instance that you mentioned, is a negative change to the life of the clients, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, is that I think it warrants another conversation with the clients to find out what are exactly now their priorities given the new circumstances, right? Would they be comfortable adjusting their retirement lifestyle, for example, to accommodate what's happening now, right? Would they be okay to adjust the education funds for their children now that there's already fire at the backyard, right? Yeah. So those are not easy conversation that we will potentially have the clients, but these are essential because if we don't take care of these immediate needs, it's very hard for the clients to move on with their life, right? Yeah. So first having that conversation, and then help them arrange their affairs, financial affairs, to adjust their wealth plan to these circumstances. This is number one priorities that we want to have. And then when they come back the next round, then we show them what are the potential trade-offs that they may have to make. Are they comfortable with those trade-offs? And then we adjust the plans accordingly. So it may warrant the selling of some of the investments to take care of the immediate needs. Those are potential solutions.
Yeah, great points, Yong Cheng. So this really shows how important regular reviews are. As life circumstances can always change, and making sure that you tweak your life plan accordingly is crucial, because you have to ensure that your resources are still efficiently allocated and your goals, or rather revised goals, are still attainable. So any final words when it comes to planning for the sandwich generation?
Thanks, Isaac. Yeah. First of all, I think it's important that while we talk about the exciting, accumulating towards retirement, of course, the more morbid things about making sure that we have set aside enough insurance coverage to take care of unforeseen circumstances. Another thing that I would encourage that to do is thinking about estate planning for yourself, right? Making sure that, for example, your wills are written, because while the wills will have to not just talk about distributing your wealth to your loved ones, and you might have to consider how do you allocate your wealth fairly, not just to your own family, which consists of your spouse and your children, but let's say if your parents rely on you for their retirement, and you might also have to consider setting aside some funds for them should anything happens to you. And if you have very young children, and you and your wife or your spouse will have to consider who will be the guardian of your children if both of you are no longer around. So these are the two important aspects when considering drafting up your will. And not forgetting things like CPF nomination, setting up your lasting power of attorney, LPA. Those are two essential to-do lists for estate planning for people like yourself who are in the sandwich generation. Lastly, I would like to encourage folks who are now in the sandwich generation that life will be challenging, Because on a daily basis, you probably worry about setting enough for your bills, putting enough for the future, for your own retirement, maybe set for your children's education. You probably be also worried about what school to send your children to, amidst all this social pressure that's going on in Singapore. And at the same time, you also worry about the health state of your parents, right? But not forgetting that the relationship that you have with your spouse. So there are many challenges that will come to you, and it's not going to be easy. But I would say that at the end of it, maybe if we take a step back, and if we look at our family, your family photos, trips that the whole family gone together, I would say that it would potentially be a very rewarding journey for you. And so I would just finally want to just encourage all of you all to withstand the challenge and then to come out stronger from there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yong Cheng, for sharing such a heartfelt message. So that's all for this week's episode. We're going to end it on a very nice and warm note. So thanks, Yong Cheng, for your time today.
Thank you, Isaac.
Yeah. So to all our listeners, I hope you all enjoyed our episode on planning for the sandwich generation. If you like this episode, follow our podcast and follow us on social media for similar contents. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. All analysis, views or opinions from interviews, recommendations and other information broadcasted, podcasted or published herein are provided for general information purposes only. Information expressed does not take into account any specific situation, particular needs or objectives, and should not be construed as specific advice or a recommendation. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal or tax professional before taking any action. Providend Limited does not accept any liability for any loss whatsoever arising from any use of the information broadcasted, podcasted or published herein. All contents and information contained herein may not be copied or reproduced in whole or in part by any means without prior written consent of Providend Limited.